Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from central British Columbia, Canada. And for all those people that are watching us say, oh, we know where Canada is, British Columbia on the west coast. Right, that's where we are in British Columbia. Today, we have a very, very interesting guest. Her name is Judith Belmont. She has over 40 years experience as a psychotherapist in private practice, mental health, corporate training, as well as a conference speaker. She is an author of no less than 11 mental health, self-help books, and 2 therapeutic card decks. I'd like to find out about that, more details. She offers hands-on practical tips and the life of more positive life. I like that. Currently, she is a workplace wellness trainer for an online training company. Judith, my God, what a bio. Welcome to the show.
Sure, it matches yours. Thank you.
So tell us a bit about your background, Judy. Where did this all start? And so obviously you got training in the one field, but then you became also a very active author in R, and obviously you're a very good presenter, hence you're presenter in many locations. So you're a busy buddy.
Well, I don't do a lot of the in-person speaking anymore. That was in the past. That was my bio. So I'm not as busy as I used to be. I was a therapist. I'm retired now. And how I got into publishing books is I was a trainer for PESI, which is a continuing ed company for therapists. I think they're the biggest in America.
Okay.
And they asked me to write a book for them. And so I ended up writing books for them and other people.
That's how it all started.
That's all how it started. I never really thought of being an author, but I always had a practical orientation. And I always, one of my first jobs out of graduate school, I have a master's in clinical psychology, was at a women's center, and they needed someone to do assertiveness training. And I needed like 10 hours a week to round out my jobs because I had a 30-hour-a-week job, or I needed 10, 15 more hours. And they were looking for a therapist for 10 or 15 hours. And to do assertiveness training, I had no clue what that was, but I applied. And that kind of changed my life, because assertiveness training is teaching people's hands-on life skills. And that's how I got into the practical hands-on tips, because I got that training where I worked for a couple of years, and then I carried it in the rest of my life.
So just stepping on assertiveness, I have a basic idea what it means. Tell us about it, because that's something that is very, how do you identify that somebody requires training in assertiveness, or does everybody?
I think everybody could use assertiveness. It's interesting. When I used to do a lot of live presentations, I would do a can role play where I had the same lines, and I answered them in either assertive, non-assertive, or aggressive way. And the audience had to decide what it was. Even after telling them the hallmarks of what assertiveness is, which is using I statements, it's not trying to change someone else. It's expressing what you want, but not forcing it on other people. It's a good way to communicate. Aggressive is more characterized by you statements, which are, you're being too sensitive, you this, you make me so angry, blaming other people. And then non-assertive, obviously, is kind of keeping things in or afraid of conflict, etc. Even after I described, I had a handout for people so they can see the differences. Usually at least half to 3/4 of people got it wrong when I did the role play. They still identified what really was aggressive. They thought I was being assertive because I was standing up for myself in this can role play. And it made me realize that we never really learned that in school, or at least when I was growing up. Maybe I mean, it's a little different now in some schools, but it's really important life skills because people get in arguments because they try to change someone's mind. They mean well, they want people to see things more like them, but that's being aggressive because you're trying to force your ideas on someone else and you end up being more pushy. And if your goal is to change someone else, and we're not talking about young children, obviously you don't want them running out in the street.
No.
We're talking about communication that's not safety hazard.
So I find this very, very interesting because I have a bit of similar background to you. I'm working on the 6th book now, and my 5th one was one about this one was released in July, and
Okay.
it's $1 billion communication skills, and it's about not how to become a billionaire, although I like it. If you want to, you can, anybody can, but not anybody, obviously. But it's all about communication skills. And I find that to be probably one of the least taught skill sets and life ability, and it falls in the category of assertiveness. Will it be this, that, or what is your, correct me if I'm wrong, what is your type of individual? Are you, as a communicator, not you, but in a general sense, are you a communicator that is assertive in different categories, or which category? So I did the same as you did. I did a lot of public speaking and presenting. I like that, but I do less of it now because of time element for one. And I find that podcasting has taken the place in a lot of cases, for me at least, of communicating, because I can stay where I am and reach many more people through the podcasting global platform than I could ever do on being on a group presentation, although I do still some of them, but not all that many. I love presenting, and I always say with presenting, when I do presentations, I believe I'm a good communicator, but people may forget what I talked about, but they will never forget me, how I present. And that part is another part that is very, very important, I believe. And so the least taught, right up to the level of universities and some of the most successful people in business or whatever they do, are very good in what they do, but a lot of them tend to be not good and effective communicators.
I think a lot of people don't know how. It's not a skill set that people learn in school.
Correct.
And there's, as I found out in my presentations, a lot of people interpret things in different ways. And a lot of people don't understand that. They think the way they express something is the way people take it. Not necessarily. Perception is more important than reality. So when people perceive things, they might perceive something as being healthy when it's really not healthy. So what I have been amazed at when I was a therapist is how people didn't know how they came across. And they often underestimated their non-assertiveness or their aggressiveness, and they thought they were just communicating fine. But when we would role play, or when they would maybe have a spouse in the room or a family member, they realized, it doesn't mean they meant to be aggressive, but they had a lot more use statements than they realized. For example, a rhetorical question is really not a question, it's a put down. So, like, what were you thinking? Didn't I already tell you that? What are you, crazy? What's wrong with you? All that is just, it's not really a question to be answered. It's a put down. So that's an example of a aggressive comment. And, people would say, oh, I say those things all the time, not realizing it was aggressive. But, a lot of it is just awareness. People aren't necessarily aware, and they think they're being more assertive than they are. But I used to tell people that if you're in an argument, chances are you're being aggressive, even if you're not yelling. You don't have to like raise your voice. But if your goal is to change someone else, you're going to be you focused rather than the goal be to express and ask for a change.
Yeah, I like it. In some cases, I know some of these individuals, we refer to them, the way he comes out of the corner, you want to kick him right back in it. So, so that from my personal perspective, I was born in Holland in 1940, actually, November the 1st, 1940. I'm going to be 85 in a week and a half, actually. 85 I call it 85 years young. And so I grew up in northeastern Holland where we speak dialect. And I loved speaking dialect, although Dutch, High Dutch as we called it, was difficult for me to communicate in High Dutch. And they always heard that I was speaking with a dialect from the northeast. They call them farmers. And saying, oh, he's just a farmer. So, and that's kind of the mindset, so self-confidence in the setting of being in speaking High Dutch was difficult for me. And so, and as I said earlier, I love speaking dialect. So then when I was 18, I was drafted into the Dutch Air Force, actually, and it was mandatory to be in either Army, Marine, or in the Air Force, so for more than 2 years, and I had to learn to speak High Dutch with an accent. And even then, I was self-confident about that. And then when I was 24, I decided to go to Canada, and I had to learn to speak English. And I did. I was not academically a success story. I failed grade 3, and I failed grade 7 3 times. So they said, what are we going to do with this guy? And so some people said to my parents, send him to the mentally challenged school. He said, no, we're not going to do that. So learn him to become a learn him to be a furniture maker. So that's what they did. And then I came to Canada, and then, but still I had self-confidence about communication skills. I was not good at it. And I was good at...
It's not your native language.
That's the one. And then the other one, self-confidence, was lacking in my case. So somebody, and I'm trying to get you to the point saying, what did you do about it? Fortunately, I already was here, at the time it was around 1990, I was 50 already. I had already a number of companies, and I was supposedly successful, but I didn't have the self-confidence and communication skills. And somebody invited me, say, go with me to Toastmasters. I said, Toastmasters, what's that all about? They said, oh, it's about communication skills. And I said, are they going to ask me questions? They said, no, you come down and you just sit down and you watch what they're doing. I said, okay, as long as they don't ask me questions, no problem. Halfway through the meeting, somebody said, hey, John, tell us all about it. And I said, oh my God, I'll never go back here. But I did. I stayed there for 10 years. And wow. It was probably one of the best decisions I ever made in my life that changed the direction of my life. And then for the people watching us, and you're very familiar with it, Judy, as I already saw by your indications, is that Toastmasters has been around. It's about communication skills and has been around probably for 20, 30, 40 years, and mainly in North America, Canada, and virtually every little city and big city has a number of Toastmaster clubs where they involve people in acquiring skills of communications. So some people ask me about that, and for me, I stayed 10 years. Not everybody does, but tens of millions of people have been involved in Toastmasters. I went to the highest level in Toastmaster, became a distinguished Toastmaster, and I'm proud of that, and it changed my life, as I said earlier. So Toastmasters, what is it all about, and what do they teach you? It's first and foremost, what it is all about is become a good listener. And then the second one, which is very important, speak on and coordinate on your feet, listen to questions, and then become an effective person in answering questions on your feet. And the other one is then evaluating other people that give presentations by listening closely to what they are saying in their presentations. And then the other one is develop presentation skills. And obviously I did that as well. And so it probably was one of the most important decisions that I made that changed my life. The other one was obviously coming to Canada, starting from nothing and from the ground up. And that part was most important.
It's great story.
Now, the other one I should just mention to you, the other one that happened to me and that changed my life is that happened when I was already here for 32 years. And, and I walked into a bookstore here in Prince George and I picked up a book. And I still don't know why. I have the actual book here. I'm going to show it to you in a minute. Is that I don't know why I picked it up, and as I looked at it, that became a very important book for me in my life. Its title was Driven to Distraction, written by Dr. Halliwell, and medical doctor, professor, well-known, wrote 18 books, 5 of them on distraction. Dr. Halliwell is ADHD and has dyslexia. And I said, oh my God, that's me. And so I wrote in the book here, the actual book, this is the book, it says January 1997. I wrote in Dutch because I never heard of ADHD, but when I read the book, I read about it and I said, oh my God, that's me. I wrote in Dutch, now I finally know who I am. And that was January 1997. And so the more I found out about ADHD, it took me, I went to Google and looking at it, reading more books and looking at it. It took me 5 years to go to my doc, who was a personal friend and delivered our 2 daughters. And he said to me, hey, John, why are you here? I said, I think I got ADHD. So we checked it out, I do. And so, and then the more I found out about it, I call it a superpower. And so in my life, in doing all the things that I do, as you do, very active, I have a number of companies, and it's not about that. And then obviously I'm a presenter, I write books, do presentations. Obviously I'm very active in podcasting, on and on and on and on. And people say to me, how do you do all this at 85? I said, it's ADHD, that's how I do it.
So you turn it into a strength.
Yes. So I thought I'd just kind of give you that background of my life, and but communication skills is critically important, and that's the point that I'm trying to make.
Cool.
So that then being said, Judy, and you saying you retired now from being, you're obviously active in podcasting, and I believe that's the new media. Less so, the news media is coming down further, like CBS, CBC in Canada, and CNN, and all the other ones, and regular newspapers that we read are all coming down further, and the podcasting is still on its infancy. It's exploding.
Well, I started podcasting because I had a book out in January called 110 CBT Tips and Tools. And I really had never been on a podcast before January, but my son, who was in PR, said, why don't you go on podcasts to try to, talk about your books and whatever. So that's how I started, and then I really like it. So I like talking to people. I like sharing, and learning. And so it's worked well for me.
Yeah, and the same for me. I'm a storyteller. That's what I am. So that who is John? Well, that's what I like to do. I like communications. I like interacting with people on different subjects, and obviously, podcasting lends itself for that. But it's still, relatively speaking, very very young.
Hmm.
And as for you, I started about 4 or 5 years ago, and first blogging, I liked that, and then with a local station, here television station, and did mainly local, regional individuals that were very interesting in a lot of ways, and then COVID came, and so we couldn't do that anymore, and then said, okay, well, I had this apartment that we now turned into a studio. Say, let's do our own, and we'll have a
Great.
studio here. And then, obviously, the more I watched television, and then we thought maybe I have to go to another location as well to find the people. But the more we watch television, the more virtual, and you see that 1, 2, 3, 4 different people on television from all different locations. They say maybe that's what we can do. And then, obviously, we want to pot match,
Great.
and so Putt Match was still at its beginning. And then we started then finding people from all around the world, and individuals like yourself and many others as you have, so.
Yeah. It's great. I know it's a lot of work for you putting it all together. It's easy for me to be a guest, but to be a host is a lot of logistics behind the scenes.
There is, and so you need a good team. We have a good team, and as it is with everything else that you do, you can't do it alone. You always need a team. So,
Right.
but I do mainly is I'm hosting as well as do guesting. So I've done about, I think 478. I think is yours, and
Wow.
there I'm
Oh,
hosting,
goodness.
and then guesting probably about 200 or 250. But
Wow.
I love it.
Lot.
Yes. So,
Fabulous.
where is it all going, in your opinion? So, you now, as you said earlier, retired from your career as practicing.
Psychotherapist. Yeah. I
Yeah.
had a private practice in Pennsylvania and I moved to Florida. And I do still see uh, a few clients online, but it's mental health coaching because I don't have a license anymore. But I still continue to see some people online.
And
Um,
so, yeah, sorry, Judith. So, I just tried to find out what you're doing now. So, you still do that. You're in Florida, retired, semi-retired, more or less,
mhm.
and so you still stay active though, because obviously
Do
you're,
that.
yeah.
Hmm.
So
Yep.
how do you see? What do you do other than the writing of the books? But took me a long time to, write a book. For 20 years, I people said to me, "Hey, John, you should write a book. You had such an interesting life." And writing books, as you know, it's not easy. And so I
Yeah.
started, I stopped, I started, I stopped, and I started. And then about 6 years ago, when I was in my late 70s, I knew if I didn't do it now, it would never happen. And so I started with this one here, Against All Odds. And so it's not about hurrah, hurrah, how successful John is, just the opposite, going through all the ups and downs. And then, it took me 80 years to live, 20 years to think about it, and 2.5 years to write it. And
Ah,
I liked it.
for you.
Yeah, and then from there, and then started writing other books.
That's great. So you started later in your life, and I started earlier. I started maybe about 20 years ago when I was a trainer for that company, Pessy. And then I ended up publishing for other publishers such as New Harbinger and Norton. But then my last one is also from Pessy, and that's probably about it. I think I much prefer promoting the books. The last book that I've done is kind of the culmination of everything else that I've written. It's a very complex. It ended up being a very big book, a lot of practical, hands-on strategies. So I
Have you
sort of
got
feel
it?
like.
Have you got a copy of the book with you there by any chance so we can show it
Well,
to our
in another
audience?
room, I don't have it right here.
Okay.
It's called 110 CBT Tips and Tools. And basically, it's 110 separate activities. Um, and there's a tip, like about, say, how to handle stress. Like, it's important to handle stress. Stress isn't only negative, it's also can be positive. Then there's an activity, which is implementation. You have some activity, and then processing. It's sort of like going over what the activity meant. And so it's kind of very simple. So it's not like a book you read from cover to cover. It's like if you want to help dealing with stress or anger or communication or think more rationally, I have like different topics and subjects. So I'm more focused now on getting them out there
Right.
rather than writing anything else.
So,
I think
so
writing is finished for me.
right. So CBT, what does it stand for? And that is your 110 CBT tips. That's the book. And so
Right.
that you just talked about. What's the CBT stand for?
CBT stands for cognitive behavioral therapy.
Okay.
Cognitive is mind, thinking.
Yeah.
Behavior is behavior. And so it focuses on the quality of your thoughts determining the quality of your life. So identifying irrational thoughts that are going to cause anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, and then changing learning techniques to reframe the thoughts and change the thoughts into healthier, more positive ways of thinking. And I'll give you an example. If you say, I'm a failure. Well, that's actually an irrational thought. So let's say you write it down and say, okay, what are the cognitive distortions? Because cognitive distortions are what can cause depression, anxiety, and the distortion there would be labeling. I'm labeling myself as a failure. That's one example of a cognitive distortion. It's also the cognitive distortion of all or nothing thinking. I'm a failure. That's pretty much all or nothing, rather than I had a setback, I didn't do well on this, I learned from it. So it gives skills, and that's through diaries and quizzes and checklists and different practices that I have in my book so that people can change around the negative thinking. Because if you say to yourself or to someone else, oh, just think more positively, you can't just do that just like that.
No.
But you can learn skills to identify what's unhealthy about your thoughts and then change it into healthier ways of thinking.
And so the key there is then, correct me if I am wrong, how do I identify that I have an issue that likely makes my interaction with others not as positive as it can be, and subsequently I become negative? Or is it who am I that I found in for myself? Who am I took a long time for me to get to.
Well, usually people, let's say when they came in for counseling, they'd come in for counseling. No one's ever said to me, I'm not thinking clearly. They say, I feel bad. I feel depressed. I'm really anxious. I'm having panic attacks. I feel like a failure. So they don't come in even imagining that it's their thinking. They just feel like this is who they are and they can't change it. So what CBT does, and also self-help books in general, and certainly my book, is teaching you how to be a victor instead of a victim. It gives you self-empowerment because it's not like, oh, my coworker makes me anxious. That's an irrational thought. No one can make you anxious. We're not talking about physical abuse, obviously.
No.
Someone could really hurt you if they punch you or whatever. But in general, non-criminal world, No one can really make you feel a certain way. You feel a certain way in response to them. So people need to dissect how they can think more clearly. And usually the trigger is they don't feel good. They don't feel confident. They don't feel happy. They feel anxious. They feel depressed. They drink too much. They eat too much. They are not conducting their lives in ways that they ideally want to. And a lot of times it's our thoughts that get in the way. And sometimes just by reframing things and challenging things and distancing yourself from some of the maybe messages that you learned when you were younger, that weren't so healthy, that caused you not to feel good about yourself. All that kind of stuff really helps.
Yeah, the key is to become. A lot of people don't maybe recognize that they have issues and subsequently start doing all the bad things, drinking too much, eating too much, and then from there and then it becomes from bad to worse, and there are no results. And now what do I do? And then it becomes more difficult, and your relationships, may it be relationship at work, may it be at home, may it be, and all of those things then may well lead to crises. And how do you get to somebody that can help and assist before it becomes a crisis, really, and goes from there and even further, right?
Well, that's what I like about self-help books like mine.
Yeah.
But there's plenty out there also, is that, it certainly is necessary for some people to see a therapist. That can be very helpful if they they have the right fit for them. Sometimes therapists might not help if it's not an orientation that works for you. But if, you can do a lot with self-help by practicing and learning. So if you go to the gym and you don't know what you're doing, then you could hurt yourself because maybe you'll, use the machines wrong. But if you go to a personal trainer and you only have a once every week or two session and don't do any work in the middle, that's not going to help you either. So
No.
basically, you need to have some guidance that either people can do, self-help books can do, in order to get you in a good path. But it's the work between sessions that really makes the difference. You're not going to get physically fit by going to a trainer once every week or two.
No. So I find that interesting
With
that
a therapist, you don't get cured by going to a therapist and then not doing any work in the middle.
No.
You implement strategies. And so that's why books like mine, and there's many out there, gives hands-on tips of like, okay, what can you do when you're feeling depressed? How do you identify the irrational thoughts? How do you communicate better? How do you change a you statement into an I statement? Because we don't really learn that kind of stuff.
And so I find it interesting, your observations about it, is that I wrote a book about that as well, is Living Young, Dying Old. And so the book is the fourth one that I wrote. That's a picture of me, actually. I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America. And so, and it's not about age. And how it happened is that going to the gym, I had a case of that, of diverticulitis, that was the rupture of the colon. That,
yeah, that's must be very painful.
very painful, and I waited too long and got to the hospital. They took out 20 centimeters of my colon, and
Wow.
and that was in 2008. And obviously I recovered well, but then I knew that all the things that I had been doing in terms of diet, my wife is a vegetarian, and so I was not quite there, and didn't listen as well as I could have. And then at the same time, I was the same as a lot of other people do. At year end, they all do the same. I'm going to do this, that, and I'm going to buy a membership to the gym. And then 2 weeks later, we can find 100 reasons why we're too busy to go to the gym. And so I got a trainer, as you refer to, and I did that. And then so for 6 years, I trained from 2009 till now, 16 years, with a bit of an interruption during COVID. And so I started training, and after 6 months, somebody came to us and said, "Hey, John, have you ever thought about competing?" I said, "Me? Really? Yeah." And so I was already then in my mid-60s, and so I thought, well, why not? And I started then working towards training. And in 2017, 18, I started competing, came in Northern BC, second bodybuilding, third in physique, the same in the province, then qualified for the nationals and the Arnolds.
Oh my God, that's a great story.
Yeah. So, but the key is that the intent was not to become a bodybuilder, but simply to go to the gym, as you indicated, work with a trainer, and then I go 4 times a week, heavy training. I don't sit there with my iPhone or socializing. I'm there to train, and I will do the same after our podcast is finished. I again go to the gym. It's about quality of life that is critical more than anything, and that for me has been the objective.
Walking the talk.
Yes. Yeah. So those kind of things, very important. So the other question is that what are some of the most common self-limiting beliefs that people have that interfere with their mental health and wellness, from your opinion?
Well, a lot of times people are afraid of other people's opinions because they don't feel like they're enough. They don't feel like they're good enough, and they compare themselves to other people and they fall short. And so I would say that's a very common self-limiting belief, that they're very judgmental on themselves and that I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not handsome enough. I'm not this enough. And to compare yourself to other people and evaluate yourself of you not being worthy or good enough is not a recipe for happiness.
Now, males have a tendency of seeking help. Doesn't come easy to a male in a general sense, including myself, although I've had counseling at different phases in my life for challenges that I was trying to deal with. And so hopefully that is becoming somewhat easier. Probably podcasting has helped as well, because we have a podcast like with yourself, myself, we never met before, and about those issues in particular in your book, that you wrote, CBT 110. The title of the book is, again, once more, Judy? The title
110 CBT tips and tools.
Tips and tools. And the book is available through all the
Amazon.
Yeah, on Amazon and all the popular areas, right? And so by reading those books and then listening to podcasts like this one that you and me are doing, is, I believe, very, very important. But for males, from my experience, to admit that they have issues or challenges, that doesn't come easy usually.
No, but I think people are appreciating more and more the importance of personal growth. And you don't have to have a deficit in order to improve. We all could use to be more grateful in our lives. We all could use to be more mindful in our lives. So you don't have to have a problem in order to want to read a self-help book. You can learn a lot of skills just to enhance your life for personal growth. So I think people are more inclined to do that, as personal growth is more of a accepted thing now. It doesn't have to be anything wrong with you to go to therapy or to read
No.
self-help books. You just want to improve. Who doesn't want to improve?
And on the other side of that is that how can people grow from loss and trauma? And that a lot of people have gone through. How do they grow from there?
There are no shortage of ways that people are traumatized.
Right.
And a lot of times people would say, oh, I know it shouldn't bother me that much, compared to other people. It's not. I said, never compare your trauma to other people. Trauma is trauma if you found it traumatic.
Exactly.
And I always would tell my clients, trauma, it's up to you to make sure that trauma doesn't make you weaker, but it can make you deeper.
Exactly.
And if you develop more depth, a lot of people who have gone through trauma, they would say to me in my office, I wouldn't have wanted to go through it again, but I like who I am.
Yeah.
I've developed a lot of empathy. I am a better person than I was before. I'm more empathetic with others. I'm more self-forgiving for myself. But sometimes, I call it, instead of post-traumatic stress, post-traumatic growth. And
Yeah.
a lot of times people focus on the PTSD and the post-traumatic stress rather than how they can grow from the hurt or grow from the trauma.
Exactly. So for all the people watching us on podcast here, the Judy's book again is available. 110 CBT tips and tools, offers practical life skills, and also deals with issue about making life happier in a general sense. And so important to read and to watch podcasts like ours. And for all the people that like our podcasting, both Judy's and myself, if you like what we are doing, subscribe to it and share it with others, and like it if you like it, or make suggestions. It's the new media around the world, and amazing and growing all the time as we speak. So, Judy, it was an amazing podcast. It took us a little bit of time to get it working correctly. I really appreciate it. I know you have another busy point after this podcast, so I'll give you some time to get ready for that. So it was a pleasure to have you on our podcast.
Thank you very much.
This podcast will be released within 2 hours as presented. I don't do any editing on it, so that's what we do. That's what makes our podcast special.
Wow. Well, thank you for having me. I enjoy talking to you, and I appreciate you having me on the show.
Thanks, Judy. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.